Well, welcome to another edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallen. It's hard to even know what to say. We'll begin by saying it's Friday afternoon. And for any of you who were anywhere near a television screen and just watched um, international relations explode, you will know why we're going to spend a few minutes talking about that. And then we'll probably go on to some other issues. But at a meeting with Donald Trump and President Zelensky in the Oval Office with cameras rolling. It deteriorated into a yelling match, as some have pointed out quite rightly. President Zelensky should probably not be negotiating in English because it is his second language. Whatever they said to one another, it was brutal. So the deal over minerals is off. Zelensky may be doing more media later today, and there's a meeting over the weekend of the Europeans. So we're just going to start there with the panel that we assemble quite regularly. Margaret McCuaig-Johnston, she is an expert on Canada-China relations, spent 37 years in government. So you know a lot about how diplomacy should work. Probably shouldn't happen in front of cameras. She's a senior fellow at the Institute for Science, Society and Policy at University of Ottawa. Tasha Kheiriddin, journalist, policy analyst, lawyer, runs her own media and public relations company, writes a column for Post Media and 1,000 other things, has her own Substack, in my opinion. Mark Norman, senior defense strategist at Samuel Associates. He was previously an officer for 40 years with Royal Canadian Navy. He left as with rank of vice admiral, but he also served as the vice chief of the defense staff. And these are three really smart people. Before we just turned on the mics here, Margaret, you were saying very nice things about the other two, and they were saying very nice things about you, and I was saying very nice things about the three of you, because you've all been writing on this. So take a moment, Margaret. Again.
Yeah, so Tasha has done a wonderful job of capsulizing where we stand on the U.S. and the deterioration of the role of the United States in the world, and what that means for the long term, and the problems that we have looming. This has just been a couple of months.
Yeah.
Less than a couple of months, and we've seen so much dramatic change, and the U.S. is receding from all its roles. But Tasha has been putting that so well in her Substack, and Mark has written a really important piece on how Canada can look at the United States in the context of military collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And it was much more negative and challenging than I had expected. It was really interesting, and
Yeah.
so I hope we can engage on those things.
I had the same reaction to those pieces, and Mark and I were just chatting for a moment ago, and just talking about the way Canada. Well, we're going to come back to the big picture. Don't worry, but that when we personalize our foreign policy, that we want to do business with only people we like and get along with, and then we want to fight with the people we don't like. It is a little bit like cutting off our nose to spite our face. We have to deal with whoever the country in question has elected or puts forward, as they have to deal with our choices. And then, as we witnessed today, there are reasons why you don't conduct foreign policy in front of television cameras when people are misreading. So why don't we go to Mark? Mark, why don't you just say where you sit today, having witnessed that, but also based on what you've been arguing?
Well, I mean, I think like everybody, I'm shocked, but the degree to which any of us are shocked is a moving target.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to unknowingly normalize completely bizarre and arguably unacceptable behavior.
Yeah.
The one of the problems with all of this is where are the checks and balances? And in particular, when we look at this through an exclusively United States lens, but then we look more broadly at the international space. The irony here is that the entire system that we've grown up and flourished under for decades is premised on some key principles which are being just blatantly not only disregarded but blatantly negated by this administration. And so, it's a troubling place to find ourselves. We're in a very disturbing power vacuum at the moment, which was one of the things that I commented
in Canada.
On. Yeah. Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's unhelpful.
Right.
And to your other point, I mean, there's lots to unpack here, but and what you and I were discussing before we came on is when we manage these issues based on personality and kind of a visceral emotional reaction, we lose objectivity. And so I'm trying to be as objective as we possibly can here and look at the indicators and look at where the option space is or isn't, as opposed to reacting to what is arguably an obscene situation that's just unfolded. And so, this is about our national interests. This is about us, kind of growing up, and this isn't a popularity contest. Like the individual, don't like the individual. It should be irrelevant to the conversation, and we need to move beyond that.
We won't if we don't.
Right, and I'll just leave it at that, and let my colleagues.
No, I think that's the important point, and we have to keep. And this is true of every country and every situation. If you want somebody to love, you get a dog. Like, this is not about friends. This is about interests, our national interests, and sometimes our global interests. So, Tasha, jump in, because you've been making some key arguments, as Margaret pointed out.
Thanks. I mean, I share the dismay and the jaw hitting the floor every time I look at my newsfeed and Google the word Trump, and it's full of the strangest things. It's almost like living in dystopia, whether it's that video he put out about Gaza and Trump Gaza.
Right.
The kinds of things that I would never even conceive of that just happen on a daily basis now. So all of us, and I agree with Mark, all of us are reacting because we're human, right? It's a human reacting. It's just surreal. But I do think we have to take that step back, because the reality is Donald Trump's not going away. In fact, he might want to stick around longer than 4 years. And we as a country, all the countries in the world now are facing this situation where it's not just transactional. Everyone assumed Trump would be a transactional president. He would manage things like a business. He's managing it, I'm not the only one saying this, like a mafia state. Zanny Minton Beddoes of The Economist had a piece just this week on the exact same vein. I made the point in the Substack that Margaret was referencing. It's about getting what you want, but in a very brutal way. It's not dealing. It's not negotiating. It's shakedown. And this is what Trump attempted to do with Zelensky. And we saw what happened in the Oval Office. I mean, Zelensky needs lessons in diplomacy. You don't act that way. But neither does J.D. Vance act that. Nobody should act this. It's just a zoo. So I think what's happened is that it's now the strongman world. And you've got strongmen in China, Xi Jinping, and you've got strongmen in Russia, Putin. We forget about North Korea. Kim Jong-un is like, he's laughing. He's like, I'm not the crazy
he's sort of off the map right these days. He hasn't. Yeah.
Like, wow. But it's that law now. So all the other countries that subscribe to the old world order, where you had alliances and you stood for democracy and you stood for principles that the United States purportedly stood for 250 years. That's what they were founded on, pushing back against the rules of autocrats and kings. Now they've elected a king. They've elected a mafia don who sees nothing wrong with saying, we're the strong guy. You play ball or else you're out, right? Literally.
So I want you all to respond to this. So there's a fact base here, sort of. I'll just put it out. He goes, Trump, this is Trump's position. You weren't grateful enough. You didn't say thank you. We have been there for you and you'd be in trouble without us. You don't have any cards. This deal on the minerals would be very helpful for you because it would generate some income. Your people are dying. You need to end this war. I mean, it's those things are true on some level. It's the way, like, can you have that conversation? Clearly not in front of television cameras without the fear of it just breaking down completely, which we saw. Now, there's also an ability, everybody can go to their corners and say, okay, I misunderstood what he said, and they can maybe try again. But there's a whole lot of people now that have to react instantly, including European leaders who are meeting over the weekend to figure out what to do. Because if this is the Americans walking away, not just from the mineral deal, but from the whole arrangement, that is trouble for all of us. Yeah. Margaret, do you want to jump in on that one to start us on this round?
Yeah, thanks. And you know, I too was appalled by what I saw in the Oval Office, but I wasn't thinking of it as diplomacy. I was thinking of it as a performance, and that Zelensky was set up. Zelensky, as we know, is a very polite person, very strong, forceful person in defending his own country and countrymen. And between Trump lecturing him and J.D. Vance telling him that he was not sufficiently grateful to the president for finding a peace deal that you know Zelensky had been resisting, which of course is not true, and so the whole thing, it all seemed up to be set up to set Zelensky up. And you know, so now we have the performance of, okay, leave. And that's it. And I'm glad he's going to be on Fox tonight, because I think that will be something.
I mean, who knows whether that will even happen, but
good point. But Trump would certainly be tuning in, and maybe he can get some points across on Fox that he was interrupted on in the Oval Office.
But the issue is here too. I mean, I get your argument about setup, but Mark, I mean, the one thing Trump doesn't like is to lose. He wants to win. And today he didn't win what he set out to get, which was this deal and to continue to promote himself as a broker of a potential peace deal. So that's not going to sit well, nor does it bode well. What's your takeaway from that about what are the consequences of this?
Yeah, well, again, we need to separate the interpersonal and emotional, which is undeniable. I mean, this is a guy who, in the last 48 hours, we've watched now three prominent world leaders, two of whom have deferred to him to some degree or another. He lives off of that. And so, you know, you can't pretend that it's not a real problem. It is. And he wants to play the strong man, the hero, the fixer of other people's problems. He wants to play that character in the public space. And so, you know, we watched this whole thing come unglued, to put it mildly. What does it mean? Well, it means that, you know, I think Zelensky is going to continue to pursue European options. You know, there is a possible irony in all of this, that it could, in fact, play out at the macro level the way that Trump and his minions and advisors kind of wanted it. This
is your war. You get on with it, right?
Where I don't, you know, I think the Europeans are, they're going to be, they're going to be beyond annoyed. You know, I think this is going to cause them to stiffen their backs even more. And you know, as Macron pointed out, you know, the facts are useful to point out that the U.S. has not been alone in supporting Ukraine, and there is more that can be done. And I think that we're going to see what the Europeans are prepared to do, because they don't have the same dismissive option space. Whether they wanted to or not, they can't dismiss this in the way that Trump can. Yeah. He has the luxury of blowing this up and walking away from it, even though his ego wanted him to be the guy that fixes the problem. Right. The reality is the Europeans own the problem more pragmatically than the United States does.
And now they really do. So I want to hear from all of you on this, because we're all kind of, I know our brains are kind of spinning around here. Like, what do you think Putin is doing today? He sat there and listened to Trump. I mean, Trump said, we put him through all of this difficulty with, the Russia gate situation. That was all contrived, and we embarrassed him. And to Zelensky, you hate Putin, and he probably hates you too. Like, it was kind of schoolyard stuff, right, Tasha? It was, my dad's bigger than your dad, and, that kind of, but there's truth in it all. And do you think this gives Putin an upper hand at this point, or is it more to Mark's point, which is we're now seeing what was the inevitable result of this discussion, which is it's over to Europe. It's your bailiwick. It's your backyard. You're the ones that have to step up. So that's kind of accomplished.
I vacillate between this was a setup to accomplish that versus this was just Trump being himself and things getting in the way, right? We'll never know. But I mean, Putin wants to humiliate Zelensky. That is part of it's been his goal through the war. He didn't achieve it on the ground, but humiliating Zelensky is something Putin, as his own strong man, appreciates, right? So Trump is now and it depends on how you view it, right? Some people will view it and go, how could he do that to Zelensky? Others will say, wow, Zelensky really overstepped because he's in the Oval Office. How dare he? So for the people who feel that, they'll look at it and go, wow, Trump humiliated him. He told him what to do. He schooled him, and so did JD, and blah, 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 right? Other people, like the Europeans, are looking at this with horror, going, okay, so we went there, Starmer went there, and Macron went there, and now it's all like in tatters on the floor. Thanks a lot, Zelensky. So I think they'll be mad too, because see, Zelensky took the bait, and I'm wondering what he was trying to get out of it, because
that's what puzzles me too.
Was this minerals deal so bad that he didn't want it? Was he trying to blow things up too? Because he kept interrupting Trump. He wouldn't let him talk. Like, at a certain point, you could have just, you take the space to stop this charade and let the cameras go away, and then you have the chat. But he pushed the theater too. So what was his goal here? Is he thinking this is going to make Europe come along? Is it for domestic audience in Ukraine? Because you're not going to get anyone to fight for you if it looks like you're caving, right? I don't know. For me, it's too early to tell. But it was theater, and Trump loves theater. He is a television. Remember The Apprentice? He is a TV guy.
He actually said that. At least it was great for the cameras. I mean,
correct.
That's kind of his instinct.
Those clips will be played on Truth Social. They will be played. They will be circulated on X. His people will slice and dice them to the advantage of MAGA and all the people who think that Ukraine is just a bunch of blood-sucking, money-sucking out of the United States. They shouldn't get any more money. That crowd. So nothing was accomplished. It's a giant mess, but I don't know fully what the end game of all these people is. I'm thinking it through.
Margaret, what do you think about that? Because Zelensky's behavior, I mean, I kind of said at the get-go, and lots of people have said that on air already, which is he shouldn't be negotiating this in a language that he does not speak.
That too.
So he said some things that were completely provocative, perhaps completely unintentionally. So that's one side. But Margaret, what do you think he did think he was accomplishing? Because if you kill the minerals deal, if you just don't like that, and we don't know all the details of that, he in the process killed any short-term prospect for peace and the ending of the war for now. Because I think the only person that can do that in the short term as Trump, but we'll see, to Mark's point, what the Europeans do. Yeah.
I'm not sure that this is the end for that, because the president still sees himself in that peacekeeping role.
Yeah.
I think he would like to get the Nobel Prize that Obama got. And so I think, and he said, come back to the table when you're ready to do a peace deal.
Yeah.
So I think that there will be a phase two. The question is, how does it get repositioned so that they can both or all three come back to the table to do that?
Yeah.
And I think Zelensky has some more work to be done, as others have said in discussions with the European leaders, who, you're right, are not going to be particularly pleased as to where this left off. This is a big challenge for Canada now, because we too are a member of NATO. We too have a huge financial stake in this, and a theoretical, not theoretical,
a large diaspora base here, which
we have more than 300,000 here who have left the war, and 800,000 who have been approved to come, and just another extension given by the government. So we have a lot at stake in this. We're going to be chairing the G7, so this is going to be floating around that, which is coming up just in June, and so that's coming up in just a few months, and so I think Mark would know more what we can do militarily to support, or financial support. But I don't think we can walk away from Ukraine, given what we've invested so far and given the stakes for that country.
And one of the things, obviously, so one of you worked this in is, because we were going to talk a little bit about the Arctic and the importance of that with the proximity to Russia, and the Chinese, of course, a whole other kettle of fish there. But, because we're still dealing with trying to make Trump a little happier about what we're doing on borders, what we're doing in terms of national security, what we're doing about paying our NATO bills. So, Mark, to Margaret's question, what do we do? What can be helpful to both Ukrainians, ourselves, as we continue to have these discussions? And in the real world, we need to do something about the North. It's our bailiwick. We're talking about the Europeans stepping up. We have to too.
Yeah, so, okay. Well, let's start with, and I'm pleased to see that the government, in its current form, notwithstanding the political issues that are playing out, is continuing to make public offers of support to Ukraine. I think that's really important, okay? So we are still in it, to Margaret's point, and we can continue to contribute. Our contributions for the last little while have been, although they've been material in terms of equipment, they're equipment that we're buying and sending directly to Ukraine, or having delivered directly to Ukraine. So, and that can continue. There's no reason why it can't. So, I guess the next thing is we should learn from what we just observed. And that has to do with the fact that, as you pointed out, Pam, earlier, notwithstanding how we feel about things that are being said and actions that are being taken, we have to at least acknowledge and respect the fact that there is some substance in fact that is the basis of Trump's position, or the position of his advisors, and that is that we have not been doing enough. And in that context, if we don't acknowledge that and thank the United States for everything they have done to help us, then chances are the conversation isn't going to get off to a good start. Okay, and as far as to the specifics of your point, we're in a massive catch-up scenario here.
For sure.
And our fiscal capacity, although it is strong in the macro terms, it has been diminished and eroded significantly over the last several years. We need to stop coming up with reasons why this is all too hard, and we need to start leaning into this in a serious way and demonstrating that we can actually do what is expected of us. And yes, I think it is entirely appropriate that we would own, to the greatest extent possible, our own backyard.
Yeah.
Why would we not? And so, there's lots of history and tradition in terms of bureaucracy and thinking and policy, that we've always looked at problems through the lens of intervention halfway around the world. And I'm not saying that that should not continue to
No,
be
exactly. Yeah.
it needs to continue to be a planning factor, but it cannot be the primary planning factor, and that we need to sort out our own backyard. And we could get into the weeds, and I don't want
Yeah.
to.
No, I think that's really true. I mean, and resting on our laurels from, World War II and saying that, we've made these financial contributions to Ukraine. The point is, this war is still underway, and there's now going to be pressure everywhere. And what can we do that's realistic? As you say, buying equipment and sending it, or we can do our bit to kind of stop the Russians at the north end. Tasha, from you a little, because Mark alluded to this, here we are with a leadership race on an election, which may or may not be called, warring factions that started out on a much more domestic and a focus on trade, which we needed to have too. But Trump's interventions has changed the political scene in this country. The liberals were they weren't even showing up on the Richter scale, and now they're back because he's given them an enemy to fight too. So where are we on that now? And what does today mean, if you can translate that?
Today is only a half a day old. I don't know what tonight will be. But yeah. The big picture, sure, the liberals have a pulse now. They do. They did not have a pulse in 2 years. And the switch has happened because the ballot question has changed. It's changed from what is, the judgment on this government for its record and particularly its leader to, leader's gone and Trump is here. The existential question is now, who is best to defend the country against the threat of absorption by the U.S.? Tariffs and those kinds of things as well. But the larger question is really who can stand on guard for Canada? And that is a totally different paradigm. It basically sweeps away all the axe the tax and slogans the conservatives had built and carefully crafted their machine to deploy. So they've got to motivate their electorate in a different way, or they risk losing parts of it that had come to them based on dissatisfaction with Mr. Trudeau and based on, I guess, a sense that, it's been a while, we'll give these guys a chance, 9 years of Liberals, that's the usual stuff. That's all gone now. So what we're seeing now is the Liberals are having their leadership race. It will conclude. I do believe it will be followed almost immediately by a general election because especially if Mr. Carney wins, as people assume, he has no interest in dragging it out because he doesn't have a seat in the House of Commons. Why would he bring the House back and not be there? It makes no sense at all. So, and he said, you need a mandate. To his credit, it's true. The government needs a that is true. We need a government that has a clear mandate to go forward for the next 4 years. That means a majority, mind you, because otherwise, who knows, right? But
and it's the same old.
Yeah, exactly. But to deal with the threat that's coming. So that's what we're facing now. That's the shakeout of this whole thing. And today, what does today mean? I think it's too early to tell what it means for Canada. But what it does tell you is don't talk to Donald Trump when the cameras are rolling about anything that's get you mad. Whoever our next leader is, don't do that because you don't win. Nobody wins.
I think that the only thing I would say to add, I agree with everything you said, is that in a bizarre way, because everything totally is, we have to use that adjective almost to describe it. It may help Poilievre separate himself. The Liberals were trying to make the argument that he's Trump North. But it's harder and harder to make that argument when Trump becomes more and more extreme in these kinds of situations. But who knows? You're quite right. Like
But Trump already said, he gave an interview to a Spectator this week where he said Poilievre is not a MAGA guy, and that's his problem. Watch for that clip to be recycled over and over. But the problem for Poilievre is part of his base is MAGA. So he's gotta do that dance. So that's his issue to deal with. But Trump does not see him as a fan.
Yeah. So that actually helps him, as you say, if they recycle that. So, Margaret, just in terms of functioning, as I said, even though I tried to argue you'd been in government for 73 years, we only know it's 37. Just felt like 73.
Like
sure. What happens in this period that we're in right now? I mean, it will get resolved. The leadership comes early in March, and then, as Tasha said, there'll probably be an early election. But we're still looking at a couple of months of rudderless ship, and at a time that it's really, really crucial. What's going on inside? Is anybody trying to figure out whether there are things we can do that will stem the flow, turn the temperature down, help something in our own best interest, or are they kind of hamstrung?
I think certainly the bureaucracy is preparing for the next government. At the same time, so they're doing their transition notes already for the, whoever wins the Liberal leadership, which we know like what's likely. And so they have to do a whole set of briefing notes for that. Then they have to do a set of briefing notes for whoever wins the election, maybe the same people, maybe not. And so, because there's a lot that could happen. This is a long, long time that we're in this.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
It's
briefing notes, but
it's not responsible. This is simply not responsible. The prime minister should have stepped aside a year ago. His party should have been looking for a nice, cushy international position that would be appropriate for a former prime minister of a country to move to, and they didn't do that. And so he had no place to go, so he just hung on, and until he really was forced out, really. And now we have the most existential crisis that we've seen since 1940. And at this time, we need a really strong government, and we don't have that. We have an abyss of people working in the background. So there is work going on for the G7 meeting coming up in June. Transnational repression is one of the issues that's going to be on that agenda, and that's positive. But there are all kinds of notes being written about streamlining government, about the need for reforming our regulation system, and then, of course, all kinds of important policy issues that will face the next government. And we have the prime minister who said goodbye to everybody, who announced that he was leaving. November? It was a long time ago, and it's months and months ago, and he's still going to international meetings on our behalf. To which other leaders must say, "Hey, what? Why are you still here?"
I mean, I kind of asked the question, and Mark, you might want to jump in on this, is that, there is that prime minister who announced his intention to leave, announcing big multi-billion-dollar projects like high-speed rail, when maybe we should be announcing some multi-billion-dollar projects to buy some defense equipment or do something in the north or make a decision about F-35s. Like, as Margaret says, kind of life goes on one level, but, are we making the best of a really bad situation by making announcements about stuff that doesn't matter? That's not helping us in any negotiation with anybody anywhere to have a high-speed rail, except maybe for some votes in Quebec.
Yeah, it's almost as if there's two alternate realities playing out at the same time, and we're kind of jumping back and forth between those two realities. And to be a bit unfair, what is playing out in the public domain as it relates to the issues that will be used in an election platform by either party, in my opinion, and others will disagree, continue to be legitimate in the context of public opinion and those issues that are troubling Canadians. But some of these more strategic issues that we started at the top, these issues of national interest and how we, for once in our lives, actually articulate national interests and then come up with viable strategies to either pursue or protect them. I'm not sure where the substance of that stuff is playing out. And I don't have an enormous amount of confidence in the machinery of government, notwithstanding its ability to keep the lights on and pay the heating bills. That's not necessarily going to be helpful. We're in a significantly different world. And this is going to require imagination and innovation and a real stiff back. And the politics of election campaigns is focused on a slightly different, well, not slightly, a different set of problems. And so that's kind of what is concerning me in the context of this conversation. And I'm not sure what the answer is. And of course, then we have this unfortunate scenario. And like many of you, I have the privilege of being part of a lot of different conversations.
Yeah.
Most of them are apolitical in nature. They're focused on the issues. And the political environment in this country and elsewhere, unfortunately, has got to the point where it's been polarized, where you're either on one team or you're not. And the merits of a particular argument or conversation or insights or advice are completely either amplified or nullified by whatever team you may be associated with. And we see that playing out in the States, and unfortunately, we're not immune to that here in Canada. And we've got to figure out how to break through that, because that is very unhelpful. This is not going to be about a liberal solution to the problem or a conservative solution to the problem. This is about, we've got some serious national problems here, and we need to get our shit together, to put it bluntly, and stop arguing about the stuff that, for the most part, is in the margins, although it does affect everyday Canadians. The reality is, if we don't get the big stuff sorted out, the little stuff is going to cease to matter very quickly, and we're going to have much more significant problems on our hands when our dollar is worth 50 cents,
Right.
when our economy is decimated by the tariffs. And I'm not predicting these things. I'm just saying these are potential scenarios. Oh, and by the way, if you do the math, if the dollar goes to 50 cents, the impact of these tariffs is completely nullified to the consumer at the other end.
Yeah,
So,
that's the silver lining, which is kind of bleak. But no, it's right. I mean, we were headed into recession, and then now we're having the debate, and Tasha, you can pick up here, but whether when we're doing the right thing for us, like dismantling interprovincial trade barriers and doing all those things, is that the right thing for us to do, or are we just sucking up to Donald Trump and then those boring factions, instead of, are we doing the right thing for this country?
Well, there's a lot of right things for the country we didn't do that we're scrambling to do now because of what Trump's doing. So the only silver lining is, yes, we should dismantle internal trade barriers. They could lower prices by 7 to 15%. I mean, I was gobsmacked by those statistics that I read. I'm like, really, why has this not been done? Well, because of internal politics, blah, blah, and we didn't have to. We should have reinforced our border. We should crack down on money laundering. Since 9/11.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it's money laundering. I just, the foreign interference piece, the money laundering, that's the real issue the U.S. has with us. I mean, the fentanyl, how much are we really sending over there? Not a hell of a lot. But we're laundering all the money that the dealers are making. That's a problem, right? So, collaboration with FinTrack and the U.S., there was a deal signed, a memorandum of understanding in December on that. After our border package was passed too, the $1.3 billion apparently hasn't really been going out the door, but we have made hundreds now of arrests at the border of people trying to smuggle. And we've also decreased the number of people going to the U.S. by 90%. Okay, 90%.
Yeah, it's huge.
We've made progress, right? This shouldn't have taken a month to do. This should have been done, like we knew about Roxham Road. We knew all this crap was going on. Anyway, so we're doing these things and we should do them. The issue is for the next 4 years, the government is facing what Trudeau faced under Trump #1. We cast our minds back. We've sort of forgotten about that because the pandemic came along. And
right.
When Trudeau came in 2015, he had an agenda. He said, I want to legalize pot and I want to help the middle class and I'm going to do child credit and blah, blah, and daycare, blah, blah, blah. And on he went. And then Trump came in a year later. Everything went out the window. Everything slid off the table. All the obsession was, oh my God, NAFTA, what are we going to do with that now? And as a result, domestic agenda did get neglected, right? There were weeds everywhere. I mean, Indigenous people, forgot about them now. Oh, dear. It was a mess because all the attention was drawn away. The same thing is going to happen. The difference is this time is that whoever comes in there, as Mark has said, you've got to focus on the big things. Now, don't even promise the little things. You can't get them done unless sovereignty is protected, unless we make sure that if Trump says to us, oh, I want a minerals deal with you, or else we're not going to protect you anymore, that we have a plan and say, okay, well, what would we get? Well, yeah, okay, well, that's got to be the focus. That's the focus. So whoever comes in has to have a plan for that. Forget about, the high speed. That's not happening anyway. Let's be honest, it's not. But they had to announce it because it's been dragging on for years. They had the tenders out. Okay. The point is focus goes up here and everything else is going to go down.
But it is going to require the expenditure of money, and SNC-Lavalin, whatever the new name of the company is, it's going to get a big chunk of change. And the point is, aren't there other things we could be spending on that when that really seems to be electioneering at that way? Margaret, if you could make the players in this country do one thing tomorrow morning or maybe tonight, what would it be? Have you got that from all those briefing notes that somebody's writing? What's the one thing they have to do before tomorrow morning?
Well, frankly, I think any new leader is going to have to unannounce the light rail. The high speed. I agree with that completely. What a waste of money when we've got 25% tariffs looming and all of these crises, and we need to focus. And so, I think the strategy is going to be really important, and we're going to need a really cohesive cabinet to look at what's happened to weaker partners or weaker countries like Ukraine, and how Zelenskyy was treated, and how that might play out in the context of Canada and the threats that have been made against us. And, I agree there's really no fentanyl problem, but we have to show Trump a win on a couple of things and get him off our back, really. And
say thank you.
Critical minerals, we have a lot of critical minerals, but companies are involved. It's not something that Canada can just hand over to the United States, rights to all of our minerals. And so, we can have discussions, but we need to in the first instance have a strategy around how, as a smaller player, Canada can successfully position with the United States. And frankly, I think one of the key elements of that is the Arctic. And Mark and I have both written about this. It's really important, I think, that we do engage with the U.S. on the Arctic. I think Carney was right to announce 2 military bases in the Arctic, one in the east and one in the west. It doesn't work to have one in the east, as Poilievre had announced, so that they can welcome all the ships as they pass by our military base on their way out of the Northwest Passage. We need to have something at the other end. Having said that, Carney, was also thanking Canada for his education. Which education was that? Was that the one at Harvard? Or maybe he talked about Cambridge, Ontario. That's this misrepresenting and sloughing over facts.
Details and facts. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, that's a novice politician
Yeah.
is what he is. And his people better, tell him, that whatever he says,
Well, that's it. And we've
has
heard
to be honest.
even some of his advisors say, look, we got to get this straightened out. I mean, the timeline on Brookfield and who you helped solve what international crisis and were you there to help Palmer? Like, it is a problem because, as you say, we're not looking for necessarily the equivalent of strongman, but we have to get our act together. And so, Mark, I'm going to give you the same question and I guess we're going to have to pretend that the election has been held, but like, if there's one thing we can do immediately, and maybe we need to put the pressure on the existing players here today, is there something we can do to sort of put the brakes on this slide that we all seem to be on, which is very reactive? To Tasha's point, this is beyond transactional. This is now, he reacts in the moment. We have all those emotional approaches. Is there one thing that we could do that would be grown up and solve in the very short term?
Well, I mean, I'm just from a purely defense procurement lens, there's probably half a dozen things that are bogged down in bureaucracy that at the end of the day, we're arguing over stuff that really doesn't matter. And, pull them up and make them a priority. We've got underutilized capacity here in Canada. And this is where I take some exception to throwing more money at United States vendors when we have our own companies. We still now, how many years? 3 years into the war in Ukraine, we still have not produced a single friggin' bullet, and by bullet I mean artillery shell, in this country. And we literally have some factories that are. It's not that they're sitting there idle, but they could have been ramped up fairly quickly. So those kinds of things. We now have shipbuilding capacity that's not fully utilized. Why? What are we waiting for? Like, what part of get on with it and start moving the money, building the in this case ships or whatever, or ammunition, or like pick one. And I could probably produce 10 things, but we're still consumed by the peacetime, kumbaya, process mentality. Let's look, not to ridicule anybody, but 2 leased helicopters.
I know.
With no sensors, wrapped in black vinyl to look cool. That's the best we can do. Like, we are continuing to perpetuate the very things that we are being accused of not doing. And so, let's grow up and start behaving like a serious country and take some risk. This is part of the problem. Everybody wants a perfect solution to every problem. Well, guess what? If anything, the last 2 months, the last 2 weeks, and the last 2 hours have shown us that we don't live in this perfect world that we want to live in. We live in the world we're in, and we've got to start accepting that we can't get where we need to be without taking some risk. And, and then let people be judged on whether they took the right risk or not, as opposed to where we are now, which is everybody's scared to do anything because they're worried about the perception and the optics. And don't promise stupid things that you're never going to do, aka,
high-speed rails. No, we could have bought more black vinyl to fake the helicopters. I know that.
You wrap a train in vinyl.
I don't even know how you deal with this, Mark, knowing what you know about the military side. Final word, Tasha, go ahead. Any magic solutions other than everybody just shut their televisions off and go to bed, or what?
No, no magic solutions, but I will build on what my friends have said, which is that we need to make friends. We right now, it's Zelensky is Zelensky's problem, right? And Trump said it. He's like, without us, good luck there, because we're your friend. We have to make other friends, because otherwise he'll say the same thing to us. Good luck. Who's going to defend you? Yeah, Britain. Yeah, whatever. We've got to make friends. I think we have to assume that NATO is dead. I think we have to assume the G7 is dead. These are not organizations in their current form that will help us one iota. I think we need a new paradigm without the United States in both cases. And if it's informal, if it's whatever it is, but that's where the relationship building will happen. And I mean, our natural allies are Europe. Europe, is how strong is Europe? If Europe ends up holding the bag for Ukraine, are they going to hold it for Canada? They wouldn't be able to do both, right? But we have to figure out where our friends are. China's not our friend. Russia's not our friend. Now the US isn't our friend. Who's our friend? So that's our challenge. Building those friendships that matter, of people who will have our back, both militarily, economically, with trade, you name it.
And when our friends asked for some LNG, we said there was no business case. And now we're going to be
not about business case, it's about security. Security and business are twin now. They're twins.
Yeah. Just a final quick point, Margaret. Do you sort of agree with that? We need a new paradigm. We got to rethink some of these institutions and approaches and get the speed that Mark keeps talking about. Let's just do it. Not wait for a June meeting and see what everybody all agrees to. Like, let's just do some stuff.
I think there are discussions going on behind the scenes. The question is, would Trump even show up at the G7?
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
And so that would be a challenge. And then, if he did, he would likely leave halfway through, like he did at Charlevoix. The meeting wasn't finished. He left. And that's all part of the performance too. So we need to anticipate what he might do in certain circumstances, but quietly making other friends. But given what we saw yesterday, I don't think we can count on the UK, and they're our most obvious friend, right? So
supposedly,
we've got huge challenges.
Yeah,
and this is
that's
why
an
we
interesting
need to
point.
get a government back in place as soon as possible.
Yeah. I do. I agree. I think great. Thank you all for kind of rolling with this today, because we didn't plan to talk about the Zelenskyy-Trump showdown because it hadn't happened yet. But actually, I think it's a really important frame for what we're dealing with, and it is one of those moments where we better grow up and start dealing with reality and not pretending that somehow magically it's all going to go away. Great. Margaret McCuaig-Johnston, Tasha Kheiriddin, Mark Norman, I really appreciate what goes on in your heads and what you put on paper and what you share with us here. So we're going to come back to you if this campaign ever happens in Canada, and we'll get your assessment as we charge through that too. So that's it for this edition of No Nonsense with Pamela Wallin, and we'll keep you posted. That's about all we can say at this point. We'll see you soon.